Anonymous, the podcast about board gamers and the insane fun we have at the table together. This is Chris.
Hey, this is Anthony.
And this is episode 488, our instant buys, plays, dodge, and burns. We like to thank all our Patreon backers for helping us bring you a brand new episode. Hello, friends. We're back. And for this special week, we are taking a look at our own rating system. And we're going to actually give you, the deep dive into things that we buy, things that we play, things that we dodge, and of course, the dreaded burn. Because sometimes those things are just a given.
Right, yeah. There's some patterns in how we play and what we enjoy and why we enjoy it and why we don't enjoy it sometimes. So we're going to talk through some of that and kind of where we come from preemptively.
Sure.
There are exceptions to all of these,
Absolutely.
which we might talk about. But for the most part, like if a game pops in front of us and we're instantly going to have a reaction before we play it, where does it fall?
Yeah. I think it's good anytime before you create a rubric or any kind of rating system, you recognize your own biases. And
Mm-hmm.
biases are not necessarily bad. It's your particular perspective based upon something.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, next week's episode is our 11th year anniversary of the podcast. So, coming from 11 years of doing game reviews and news and media and all that kind of fun stuff, we have cultivated a certain perspective. But it's important, like in anything in life, to have that perspective in front of you so that you know that's what's there. You bracket it, as they call in some phenomenology kind of areas, where you recognize your bias and you see the thing as it is, but know that your biases are always there. You don't want to have your biases in the back driving the car.
Right.
So,
100%. Yeah, like let's be self-aware enough to
yes.
understand what we're going to present to people so that you don't come across as completely unaware, which is never flattering.
Yeah, and this way you can be more objective because you know this is a thing for you. So when you review or you present it or you educate about it, you're starting from a place of knowledge.
Hmm.
And that knowledge is from yourself. Like, how am I coloring this situation? Can I play against that? Should I question that more? And again, we want to give you as deep of an analysis as possible of the greatness of tabletop gaming and sometimes the not so great. But where's that come from and why? Those ratings are important. As I mentioned, next week, BGA, 11th anniversary, Anthony. We're doing a thing.
Oh, okay.
So it's going to be the best of our year. We do this every year. We take a look back at last year and we pull up all the best acquisition disorders at the tables and the best features and talk about what we've done over the last year. And then right after it, because we are quickly coming upon our number 500th episode of Board Gamers Anonymous, Anthony, we are going to start something a little different this year. We've done a top 100. We will do another top 100, but we're going to follow a little bit more on the mainstream this time. We're going to break it down in our features every week. We're going to do 10 each week, both of us.
Yeah, so if you want to deep dive into the top 100, stay tuned. We have 10 episodes coming up.
Yeah.
And so some of you are on the Patreon and you maybe heard me kind of do something similar last fall. I know it's just me and it was my old list. This is going to be a little more formal. There's going to be both of us together. We're going to go through our new lists, which are updated for this year, minus the Hall of Fame.
Yes.
It's going to be much more of a deep dive over the course of an hour or so. So definitely tune in. Don't think like, oh, I already heard that. Like it's going to be more thorough, in depth, and updated. I don't even know what my list is yet. I haven't done it yet, so I'm excited.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, Anthony, for episode 490, we're going to we've talked about this for several years because there are games that have been stuck in our top 100 for quite some time, especially in the top 10. They've been exceptional games. We've come back to them. We replayed them multiple times, different groups, different situations, and they've become so good and so ingrained that we thought that now more than ever, we should probably, now that we're hitting number 500, we should pay special honor to these and give them the place that they deserve. and allow us to take a look at more games for our top 100 list that maybe we normally don't get to. Maybe those are the games that just don't make the cut.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So we have a tremendous, tremendous schedule coming up for you all. And of course, we'll let you know each and every week what's coming up so that you can follow along with us. We really do want your feedback as much as possible. As I said, episode 500 is a big milestone for us. And we certainly want to know from all of you what would you like to see coming next from BGA. Obviously, we'll wrap up the year typically as we do. We have a number of really cool features. We do our holiday gift guide. We talk about the hotness from PAX Unplugged. We do the year in review. A whole bunch of really cool stuff. But what else? What is the future of BGA? Anthony, can you look into that magic 8 ball and shake it and figure out what it is?
I got no idea, man.
All right. I'm going to shake it. Okay. Damn it. Ask him again later. All right. We'll ask him
Yeah,
later.
yeah. Oh no.
Damn it. All right. Well, let's get into that later. But before we get into all the fun stuff, we wanted to mention the Dice Tower Awards. A couple weeks back, Chris and I went through the awards season, Anthony, while you were out in Seattle. And they had nominations, which we are a part of, more or less, as far as helping them make nominations for their best games of the year. Tom Vassell came to us personally and was like, guys, I don't know what to do. This board game thing is so new to me. Actually, he didn't say that, but that would be fun if he did do that. But a lot of great people out there in the industry got together, made nominations, and based upon that, a lot of people voted for these games. So there's a pretty extensive list for Dice Tower Awards. I'm going to read these off. Anthony, let me know if anything hits your fancy. Chris and I always already talked about a number of these. The best 2-player game was Wandering Towers.
Okay.
All right. That was a big game with Chris. He's a big fan of that one, so pretty surprising here. Then that goes along with, I'm sorry, let me take that back. I shouldn't say that. I should say the best welcoming game was Wandering Towers. It's not a 2-player game. It's a welcoming game for Dice Tower. The best 2-player game was Sky Team,
Well, yeah, that's. I hope so.
which is pretty much everyone, including
Yeah,
Eschenspiel.
I'm
Yeah,
going to assume Sky Team has won at least 4 of these
yeah.
as the Spiel des Jahres winner.
Best party game, Blob Party. Best solo game, Legacy of You.
Yeah, yeah,
Best reprint, The Castles of Burgundy.
100%. I'm down with that.
Best co-op, Sky Team.
Yep, yep. Very good, very good.
Best small publisher, Distilled.
Oh yeah, that is a small publisher. That's funny,
Mhm.
but yeah, that's good.
Best new designer, Last Light.
Okay. No comment.
Best theming, Thunder Road Vendetta.
People love this game. I
They
still have
do.
not played it. I have no interest in it thematically. I could put this on my dodge list for later, like post-apocalyptic.
I would say the same thing too. I did see at the table, and it does look very cool.
I
Uh,
believe it. I just
as a theme, I don't really have a particular. I have no interest in it
yeah,
theme wise, but I saw it at the table and I was like, I was intrigued.
yeah,
So, yeah, it's got a fancy production, so they do a good job as far as the theme is concerned. Best production, obviously, Anthony, big surprise here, Castles of Burgundy. I don't know why production and reprint is different, but sure. Uh,
right. Almost
best,
always they're going to overlap because
yeah. Best art. I don't necessarily agree with. We had a lengthy discussion about this. Best art, Lorcana, just
really,
because I feel like uh, the artwork for Disney is kind of a given. I don't think there's
right.
anything specifically new there,
I
but
feel like you should exclude any CCG from the best art category for a board game award
sure,
because they're always gonna. If you put CCGs in here, it should just be all CCGs because they always have all the best artwork.
sure.
That's their
And they
thing.
have individual pieces of artwork
Yeah,
too.
they spend millions of dollars on artwork. Like,
Yeah.
um, okay. I mean, there's a lot of great board game artwork. I feel bad about that one.
Yeah, I kind of I think Chris was on board with that. You have to go listen back to episode 482. I kind of raged about that because I think that and there was another Disney game out there. I feel like Disney is its own thing and I feel like
Yeah,
even if some of the artwork is new imaginings of the characters and things. They're coming directly from previous art pieces.
Yeah.
So maybe it should say best original art
Mm, yeah.
instead of
I'd be
just,
down with that. Yeah. Because
or best artist. And then that would kind of preclude the CCGs in that case because CCGs typically have a lot of artists to
yeah,
produce all those
yeah.
cards.
Give me
Mhm.
best artist. I would love that actually. Because and not every game has one artist, but Sleeping Gods also nominated. All Ryan Lockett.
Yeah, he's the man. Best strategy game, Anthony. Not probably big surprise here. Earth.
Yeah, boo.
People like the Earth. People like Earth, man.
Yeah, I
They're
love
very
Earth. I don't enjoy
whoa.
the game Earth.
Hot take there, buddy.
That's super hot take.
Most innovative game, Sky Team.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And game of the year, wait for it, wait for it, Earth.
Uh, okay. I mean, it wasn't a bad year. It just wasn't like a super strong year either. And Earth was buzzy.
Yeah, I think Earth needs to get a time machine, go back in time, release their game prior to Terraforming Mars and several other games,
Yeah.
and then it would feel new and innovative.
I just don't want to hold a hand of 25 cards. That's
Uh,
all. It's not fun.
it's
It's
not cards, it's dirt in your hands, right?
it's
Or compost or
it's
something. You
co-
dirt it, you compost.
yeah, once you look at every single card and figure out what they
Uh-huh.
are. Uh,
I think Terraforming Mars had that issue too with some of its expansions where you had to go through the massive deck for different reasons.
yeah. Yeah.
So,
It's never a fun thing. I don't know why we keep
nope.
doing it.
I guess because from a designer point of view, they have the cards, and sometimes the selling point is the cards, like how many different cards and different actions and snowballing and combinations.
I just
But inevitably, the real issue is it's such a big stack that you don't get to see those things,
right.
or someone gets lucky, like in Wingspan, and gets to throw down two ravens, in the first and second round or whatever, and they just blow everyone away, despite the fact everyone has their tableau fill.
Yeah. I don't know. Like Suchi solved this with underwater cities, and everybody just seems to be ignoring that exists. Like smaller decks broken up into stages.
Yeah,
You could
it's.
still have 400 cards in your game. Just break it up into like 5 stages of 80, and then the deck is more reasonable and more balanced. Um,
I mean, that was always my problem with Terraforming Mars. You
yeah.
got a great card, and it costs 30 or 40, and you're like, I can't.
Right.
It's like this is just going to sit in my hand for like several stages, or the temperature's not there yet.
Right. Or later in the game, you have a handful of cards that are for early game, and you can't use any of them. They're
Yep.
useless.
Hmm.
Like, oh, you could
Well,
sell them for $1. I'm like, yeah, but now I have no cards.
and you also have to buy them for $3 to be
Yeah.
fair. So, yeah, it's not fun. No, I think, but even Seven Wonders, even earlier than Underwater Cities, you had the different errors.
Yeah.
So the idea of anytime a game has a civilization building or has a timeline to it where you
Yeah.
would build or do certain things earlier than later.
Yeah. I feel like that would work with a lot of games. Like Earth, do eras, do
Sure.
geological eras. Terraforming Mars has actual years built in or generations built into the game.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know. Maybe more people will come back to that, but I'm
I
tired.
start
I'm tired of 600 cards in a deck. Stop doing
no.
that. It's too much.
I've played a lot of solo Terraforming Mars on Board Game Arena
Mm.
just because it's quick and easy. And when you play with other people on Board Game Arena, you're there forever.
Oh my
Just
gosh, it's
inevitably, you're there
so
forever.
slow, so slow.
So I play solo, and then you get that initial 10 cards that come out, with the corporation, if you play with Prelude and stuff like that too. And I'm just like, none of these, I can't play any of these.
Hmm.
Like, I want a mulligan. So I just concede that game and start it again and again and again because, like, what's the point of me having cards that I can't play for several rounds?
Right. Yeah.
And that's when Terraform Mars. I mean, again, a lot of games have this problem, but it's something that can be resolved. I mean, even drafting,
Yeah.
even meaningful drafting would be better, but sometimes that does not happen.
Yeah.
So, all right, well, there's your list of Dice Tower Award winners. Congratulations to all the winners, and also congratulations to all the nominees. These are all very great games across the board. You cannot go wrong with any of these across at any point. Which, Anthony, also leads us to we were not able to attend. Several of our friends were able to attend. Unfortunately, we were supposed to have guests on for this episode to talk about Gen Con and all the stuff that happened. That will be at a later point, I think, at some point later. Several people from BGA did attend, but Gen Con 2024, the 50th anniversary of Dungeons and Dragons, obviously was a big thing. And they had a record number, 71,000 people at Gen Con.
That's a whole lot of people in that convention center. I tell you what. That's
It is.
we were both at Gen Con 50 and you couldn't really move. So
Nope.
I don't know how they jammed more people in.
It's impressive and also dangerous these days. A lot of
Uh-huh.
people came home with COVID. A lot of people.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing from directly from those people. So
And a lot of people that, in some cases probably took some precautions, but considering that amount of people in that small space and the
yeah.
fact that our hobby is literally touching game pieces that other people have touched 100 times over. So, yeah, that was the thing. So congratulations, Gen Con. Big number. Glad to see that the hobby's growing. And maybe at some point they really need to put a cap. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I feel like they had one. I thought they had sellouts before, but now that they've increased the number. So who
I mean,
knows?
there's only one football stadium. There's, no, there's
I know,
nowhere else
right?
to go.
Yeah, yeah. The basketball arena is like 5, 6 blocks away. It's too far. So
Jeez. Yeah. Hopefully you all had a great time there. A lot of great games, a lot of good displays, especially they had a number of different cabinets displaying all the wonderful D&D stuff for the 50th anniversary. So, if you did not get to check it out, check out, Gen Con for all the great stuff up there. There's also, I think, in America and in Britain, they've also had commemorative stamps for the 50th anniversary of D&D.
yeah.
So if you're in America or Britain, I think you can order them regardless if you're not in the countries of origin there. But a lot of good celebrations happening. Hopefully, PAX has something as well.
Yeah, yeah, I would hope so. Like, just it's a big deal, and the fact that we're recognizing it not just as the nerdy folks that we are, but like as a society is impressive.
Yeah, and I think you made a great point that I had not thought about earlier, as D&D being an American art form,
Mm,
which almost completely original as far as the game mechanics and the styling of the game itself,
right.
which
Yeah.
has
Like,
gone the world over.
yeah, it's developed and originated here. It to some degree. Obviously, it's a very um, derivative art form in itself. Like, it draws on so
Sure,
many other fields and forms.
storytelling and
Yeah,
yeah,
it's based on old war games and it's based on like Tolkien
well,
and everything else.
yeah.
But tabletop RPG as a concept, yeah, it started with that.
hmm Well, just along the line, like same thing with music, right? And
Right.
jazz,
Hmm.
very American invention, but based upon previous forms.
Sure.
So, a lot of good stuff to celebrate. All right, well, that's everything that's happening out there in the world. Anthony, let's get on to the episode. Let's talk about the games that we want to hit the table. Let's talk about our acquisitions disorders.
Okay, so time for me to geek out a little bit,
Uh
folks.
oh.
It's happening. Um, so there is a Kickstarter up now, which you probably have seen, whether you're interested in it or not, because it's making a ton of money. Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere RPG. Now, some background here. Brandon Sanderson is a fantasy author. You, a lot of you probably know him. Some of you maybe not. But I've been reading his books since Elantris came out, which was his first novel that came out forever ago, like 25 years ago, something like that. Like, I read it back in college. Um, and this man is ridiculously prolific as an author. So his first book came out, like I said, like about 25 years ago. Not even 25 years ago. What is it? 2005. So not even quite 20 years ago. Um, and he has since then released dozens of books across a bunch of different series. He just writes and writes and writes and writes. Like, famously during COVID, he wrote 4 novels with just extra time that were outside the stories he was already writing, and then he pushed them all on Kickstarter and made some ridiculous, like $40 million or something. Like, people backed these books. So the this particular Kickstarter is for a tabletop role playing game based on the Cosmere. Now, the Cosmere is the shared world in which all of his stories take place, with a couple of minor exceptions. Um, Now, originally, leading up to this, until the day it launched, we thought it was called the Stormlight Archive RPG. The Stormlight Archive is his major fantasy series. So if you think of like The Lord of the Rings or The Wheel of Time or Shannara, like those big epic, you know, arcs of books, Game of Thrones. That's Brandon Sanderson's version of that. He has a bunch of series that he's written, but the Stormlight Archive is like the big one. It's supposed to be 10 books lifetime. He's publishing the fifth book in December, which is the end of the first arc, and then the second arc will start at some time in the future. Um, so that was supposed to be the RPG, and then they're like, "Surprise! Just kidding! It's the whole Cosmere, which is all of the book series." So Stormlight Archive is the first batch of these coming out in 2025, and then Mistborn, which is another series of books that Sanderson has written, which predates the Stormlight Archive, but also have been written over time. That one's coming in 2026, and then there's other ones for Elantris and World Hopper. I'm sure more to come. There's a bunch of different worlds that he's built out. So it's super exciting if you're like a fan of his books because each of these is going to have new lore. There's never really been art books or visual representations. In fact, Brotherwise Games, which is publishing this particular Kickstarter in partnership with Dragonsteel, which is Sanderson's publishing company, the first like visual representations of a lot of the characters from the Stormlight Archive was in a miniatures campaign that they ran last year, which I backed. So it was just for miniatures. They didn't do anything. They weren't for a game. They're just like, you want a miniature with Kaladin from Stormlight Archive? Here you go. You can buy it. Um, so this is going to be give like full artwork, just expanding on that extent more extensively. Um, and that's exciting by itself. But then you also have like this really interesting looking role playing game kind of built all around this. It's a D20 system, um, but it's unique in a lot of different ways, right? So you have different types of heroes that you can represent. Like if you're playing in Stormlight, for example, you can be an Artifabrian, which is like an engineer or a shard bearer. There's these warriors who can wear these like magical suits of armor and carry these magical weapons that are like descended from ancient times. There's knights radiant who have like basically they're superheroes, right? They have these special powers, these magic powers, but they fit within these different um, classes. So different types of knight radiant have different types of powers. So like some of them can fly, and some of them are can speak, across different worlds, and other ones can create like connections between things. I think there's 8 of them, if I remember correctly, and then a ninth is not in the game because it's unique. And so all of this looks really interesting. The artwork looks fantastic. The world itself is fascinating, just having read it. And they brought in a lot of people who really know their stuff, right? So like Andrew Fisher worked on Star Wars: Edge of the Empire. Lydia Swen worked on Legends of the Five Rings. Max Brook worked on Warhammer 40K. Laura Hersbrunner worked on Dungeons and Dragons, and they brought in all of them to kind of build this system. Um, and so everything's built around kind of living within that system. And the really cool thing that I'm most interested in is this plot die. It's a small little mechanic, but basically, if something big is happening in your story and your campaign, the DM can say you're rolling a plot die with this, and it can like elevate the stakes of an individual role and make more interesting things happen. That like, oh, I rolled a 20. Okay, some crazy stuff happened. Like, okay, I rolled a 6 on the plot die. Okay, things are changing. We're taking it. We're diverting. Something significant is changing and happening here. So I'm not a big tabletop role player, and it's not because I don't enjoy it. It's just because I have struggled to find a good group to do so with. And part of that is like I don't know how to GM or DM really well, and I don't know these systems really well, and I don't always know the worlds really well. So this is very exciting to me because it is a world I already know. I've read all these books. Well, I'm actually rereading Stormlight Archive right now for the third time because the new book is coming out in December, and they're really long, so I remember everything that happens. So I know the world, I know the characters really well. I know all these classes, and obviously I need to learn the rules to the RPG. But like I feel invested already in a way that I don't feel like I have before, except maybe Star Wars, um, which is maybe the only other RPG I've really gotten into other than D&D. So I'm excited here. The one downside is that it's kind of expensive. Like, these are kind of high prices. Like even at the base level, if you just want the PDFs, it's $60. That's a lot, um, just to kind of dive in. And if you want everything, so like you get all the Stormlight books and the Mistborn books that are coming in the future, it's like $200. So And the most expensive batch is like 385, which is a lot of money for a tabletop RPG. Now it is like 6 books and 5 supplements and 50 miniatures and a bunch of dice. So it's a lot of stuff, but it's a lot of money too. Um, but I'm going in decently here. I have backed this already. I'm excited to play it, and I'm currently trying to find like a beta group because they do have the betas up. You can test it on different systems. So um, if you dig Stormlight Archive and want to play, let me know. Hop in the Discord. You can back us on Patreon, join us in Discord. We'll get a group going. Um,
Nice.
so yeah, check that out. It's the Cosmere RPG. It's already at 6.5 million with 20 days to go. Again, Brandon Sanderson's he has the record for the highest Kickstarter. I think it was 41 million dollars. The miniatures that they did last year raised like $2 or $3 million. So it's gonna be a big one. And I'm excited for it. I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with it.
It's interesting because a lot of these come. This is kind of like the CCG situation where we're talking about D&D, and there's a lot of like similar type systems that come out, and they just kind of disappear.
Mhm.
This one seems to be. This is going to stick around.
Yeah, 100% too, because there are I can't remember exactly how many worlds there are in the Cosmere. It's like 7 or 8 different worlds that
Yes.
he's written in, but he keeps writing. Like there's more books. Like he's only
Great.
halfway through the Stormlight Archive. There's gonna be supplements for years to come.
Sure.
There's no reason not to. Like this is already gonna have a strong player base. You've already sold at least 25,000 sets of these. So, I'm excited about that because it means more content will keep coming. It's not just gonna be a
Hmm.
one and done, you know? And that's what a lot of these RPGs based on
That's what
IPs
I'm
end up
saying.
being. They're
Yeah.
like, "Oh, cool, it's The Witcher. Here's the base book. Maybe we'll do a supplement in a year or 2, and that's it. We're done." And I'm like, "Okay, that's fun." But this will keep coming, and it's like there's lore in here, there's new stuff. It's all canon. Anything in the books is canon. What you do with that is not canon, and the game systems are not canon. But Sanderson has said, but the lore and the pictures and everything are. So it's like you're learning more about the world if you're already invested in that. So I think people are going to buy this who don't even play RPGs just to learn more about the world that they like.
Yeah, it looks great, and the artwork is amazing. I'm not familiar with the books, but it certainly intrigues me, and this is a really good opportunity to get involved.
Yeah,
I love the I don't know what I don't even know what to call it, like cross pollination, where it's like you can experience the lore from these wonderful books, but also take part in the universe in a meaningful way.
yeah,
And I think that's always been one of the challenges and the attempts from so many different authors. Like, I produce a book, now it's an RPG, and you're like,
yeah,
eh. Or it's an RPG, and now I made books out of it. You're like, or in some cases, as we've seen, I think more recently, where it's like it's a tabletop game and it's an RPG, and you're like, maybe. I mean, Root did that recently. Tricarion has an
yeah,
RPG for
yeah.
some reason.
For
I'm not
some
mad
reason,
at it. I'm just like, but why?
yeah,
Like, I
yeah.
played that game. I love that game. It's one of my favorite games. But I'm just like, huh? But this is a deep, rich universe with wonderful classes and content. The artwork, the miniatures, and it's just great that this will be able to be picked up.
Yeah, it's perfect for this. Yeah, when they
Yeah.
first said they were doing it, I'm like, "Oh, that's a perfect world for that." And the way they've
Yes.
done it is a perfect implementation of that. Now, obviously, that all depends on how it comes out. I haven't played it, so I can't tell you it's
Sure.
actually good, but very excited to see what they do here.
Well, the number of RPGs, and we'll talk about this, in our future. The number of RPGs that I've like stepped into, and then just there's nothing else,
Yeah.
and you really need a community. And I think that's why D&D has done so well, not just because it's the originator in almost every way, but because the community grew around it and the community supports it so well. I think, Wizards of the Coast needs to listen to that. It's the community. It's
Mhm.
the community that makes the RPG eternal and practically used in every way, shape, or possible. So, excited that this might come out. Excited this might be an ongoing real thing out there in the world, because that might be another way to actually get a real RPG to the table.
I'm gonna have it. I'm gonna tell you,
Nice.
I'll have it, and I will be very nerdy about it. Like, if we play, you'll be like, "Why are you so excited about this thing that's happening?" I'm like, "You have to read book
Oh
3."
no, we're gonna do that Lord of Rings thing. I mean, not the Lord of Rings. Game of Thrones thing all over again.
Oh yeah, you're not gonna read these, so it's
It's like,
fine.
fine, just
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean,
Eventually, the Netflix series will come out at some point.
oh
You
my
know
gosh,
that, right?
11 seasons later, yeah. There's
Well,
so
at
many
least
spoilers. I could spoil the heck out of this. I'm not
oh
doing it right
no.
now. No spoilers. No spoilers.
I wonder if the RPG spoils things.
That's a good. I mean, I think it has to inherently,
Sure.
just structurally, based on where the first book does up to like the where they're at now.
Okay.
But maybe not with specific characters, but just like systems wise, you're gonna if you play the RPG, you would know things about the world
Sure.
that are not revealed right away in the books.
Gotcha. So maybe at some point when you do get this, maybe a primer as long as like you should read this before you do this
Oh,
kind
sure.
of situation. That'd
Yeah.
be good.
Yeah. Once I read through these, I'll be able to tell people like read up through the second half of the third book or something.
And again, not having read the series, but again, other series that I've read through and were able to pick up the RPG. Like I said, sometimes they're only an inch deep,
Hmm.
but I still love owning them.
Yeah.
I love owning where they have like they went through it and they put together a system and they did the math and you have the characters and the different classes and stuff like that based upon a book series that you love. So this is fantastic.
Yep. Yeah.
All right. Well, speaking of fantastic and speaking of gigantic genre breaking series, Lord of the Rings is a thing that we love and is out there in the world and never seems to disappoint these days more than ever. We've previewed this a little bit previously. One of the things that came out at Gen Con was there was actually a demo copy available of the Lord of the Rings Duel of Middle Earth. So there is some hope and prayers that this might actually see the light of day at Essen Spiel, but it was available for demo play at Gen Con. So the few details, and they still don't have a rule book out yet for such a small game, it's kind of surprising.
Yeah.
But if you played Seven Wonders Duel, it is Seven Wonders, the civilization building game based upon card drafting, where you build a tableau of cards that represent a number of different elements of society, including the economy, the military, the science, the civic. Duel came in and said, "Hey, that's a great game. Let's shrink it down a little bit to a more manageable form, especially in the two-player version." So this is the brilliant game or games from Anton Bauza and Bruno Cathala, and I honestly never thought that they were ever going to go the IP way. Like Seven Wonders has just established itself as its own thing, but they brought Lord of the Rings in, and you were like, "Oh, what is Repo Production going to do here? Can they do anything good or better than we've seen previously?" And according to initial reports, they have. Now, if you played the game, you know basically it's the same kind of drafting, but you instead of drafting from a hand of cards that gets passed around, you're actually drafting from a tableau. You set up this pyramid-like tableau where some cards are revealed and some cards are hidden. And as you pull the cards away, the cards become revealed. You'll take those cards, and again, you build the same tableau. You have a military challenge because you're fighting back and forth a tug of war as far as military. And then there's an opportunity to collect science. And that's also another victory condition. And then the final one is just generally points. So you win by military, you win by science, or you win by points, which is typically civics based. Lord of the Rings come in here and they do something a little different. Now, whether or not you're a big fan of Lord of the Rings, but if you love Seven Wonders Duel, the two things that they do here that might be very interesting for people is one, they take out the challenge of the economy. So when you play Seven Wonders Duel, if you want to build one of your cards into your civilization, your tableau, you have to see what the material requirements are. And based upon what your opponent has, those cards might be more expensive. So the more cards that your opponent has of wood, if this requires wood, you're going to be paying more money out to the bank. You don't have to do this. No more economy. The other part is, of course, like almost any other game, counting up victory points. So there's no score track here in Seven Wonders Duel. Here in this game, no civic kind of point scoring at the end of the game. This is all about the tracks here. So basically, what you're going to do is the same thing. You're going to pull from the tableau. It looks very similar. But what you're going to be able to do is instead of having the military track, you're going to have this really interesting slide quest track. So you'll have this very clear track with the Nazgul character on it, chasing down the Fellowship, and both sides are trying to play cards out there so that they can move either away or towards that particular Fellowship. And then you're going to have, instead of wonders that you'll be able to build, you'll have shared landmark tiles that you'll be able to place out. Those will give you special abilities throughout the game. And then, of course, what you're going to be able to do throughout is you're trying to gain favor and collect um, ownership of certain areas of a map. So you're going to have castles and knight like figures on the board. And the idea is to try to capture those particular areas. If anyone's able to do any of those three tasks, again, the science, the military, or uh, in this case, not points, but the different alliances and allegiances that you can put together, you're going to be able to win the game. So one of those three challenges are going to have an outcome, and that's what's going to win you the game. So it becomes a lot more tense because you're not just racking up points throughout the game. It's a lot more challenging as far as that's concerned. Artwork, of course, is fantastic. Vintage Trait is doing that amazing work. Again, Anton Bauza, Bruno Cathala, coming out from Repro's production, hopefully very soon. Again, can't wait to get my hands on this.
I'm super excited. Yeah, it's this was almost on my acquisition disorder this week too before the Cosmere RPG launched.
Yes,
Um it's I don't know. I love Seven Wonders Duel. It's one of my favorite games. It's in my top 10, top 20. I can't remember
sure.
exactly where, but it's and you throw in Lord of the Rings, which we'll get to in a little bit, but that's like an instant buy for me. Like I have to have
Yes,
this game.
absolutely. So a lot of great stuff coming out. All right, now on to our at the table. We'll let you know if those games are a buy and you should round pick those games up. If those games are a play and you should sit down and enjoy them. If those games are a dodge and you should avoid them. Or in fact, if those games are the dreaded burn and do not play, avoid at all risks because they are not worth your time. My friend, what'd you play this week?
All right. So I played a game called Forage, and specifically, I kind of want to talk about a sequence of games here because Forage is the third in a trilogy of games from Mark Tuck called the Nine Card Solitaire Game Trilogy. Not very catchy, but it is descriptive. It gets the job done. So we have to go back to the first game, Orchard, which came out in 2018, and it's actually based on a print and play. Um, 9 card nano game that won the 2018 Golden Geek for print and play. So this is a game that's been around for about 6 years, and it was very popular and award winning several years ago. And in Orchard, you are laying out these different cards, and they overlap with each other, and you place dice on them, and you're trying to build your orchard with these different types of dice. Right. So you're harvesting fruit and trying to score points based on how they overlap. Um, Now, there's concept here of rotten fruit and things that don't work, but ultimately you're trying to score as many points as possible. This solo only, and it takes about 10 minutes to play. It's very quick, right? It's like a button shy game if they threw dice in the box. Like button shy games have to fit in the wallet, so they only have cards. This has dice, and therefore they can throw other stuff in there. But it's like a tiny little tuck box. It's the size of, I don't even know. Like I would say a pack of cigarettes, but it's not really relevant to anybody anymore. But it's not very big, right? Um, so Orchard came out in 2018. Now they had a sequel, Grove, that came out in 2021. And this one, kind of blew up a little bit more because Orchard had been popular. And I feel like Grove is the one that the most people kind of glommed onto.
Hmm.
Um, and this did a few things differently, right? It has 18 cards instead of 9, and on the backs of those cards are like scoring conditions, very much like Sprawlopolis, where you have, you're going to put out some scoring conditions, and you're going to play with a certain number of cards. In this case, just the 9, and it still has the overlapping feature where you're building out like a grove of fruit, right? You now have wild card elements though with glades, and there's a squirrel that's running around and picking fruit as well. So it kind of complicates the system a little bit. It doesn't really make it any longer, but it gives you more to keep track of, which is always fun. So just a little bit more. The newest version of this game, Forage, was a Kickstarter run back in 2022, I just got it. I don't know what happened. And, like, it just kinda got lost in the ether for such a small game. But I did just finally get a copy of this, from, Side Room Games, and it feels so just backing up a little bit, I loved Orchard, I gave it a buy. I
Hmm.
don't think I ever formally reviewed Grove. I think it came in and I lost my copy in the move. Um, but I do like it a lot. I think it's a great game. I don't think it does significantly enough more than Orchard. It's really kind of the same system, but it adds in the scoring cards. Uh, with Forage, it is kind of the same thing, right? You have a deck of 9 cards, you are laying them over the top of each other, then placing dice on those. What's different in this one is you still have the recipe cards that came in Grove, so that's kind of added in there. But now you have like different symbols on the cards overlapping each other, and when you place the dice will based on how you overlap those symbols and if they have the fruit or not the fruit, the things that you're foraging for in the forest. So it's like mushrooms and nuts, and I forgot what else. Um, there's also mice that come out. So if you overlap a card that does not match, then mice come out and block things, and those give you negative points. So it's interesting. It slightly complicates that system, but not actually in a way that I've enjoyed very much. And I don't really know why. Like I don't typically have a problem with things like this. But Orchard and Grove just had such a simple, straightforward system, and then Forage kind of throws in a thing that just is a little negative. Like it's not that because in other games, like you're just not scoring points. In this one, you're getting negative points because you didn't match things up correctly. So it kind of encourages you to play conservatively, but it also rewards like luck of the draw because you only ever have a certain number of cards to work with. So I I don't love Forage, quite as much, is what I'll say. It's not you know what, I'll even say it's a dodge because it's not that it's bad, it's that it is derivative of Orchard and Grove is the
Yeah,
best version of this system, where you take what works really well in Orchard, add in the scoring cards, and it's a very smooth play, still in that 5-10 minute period. This is taking Grove and kind of almost taking a step back with it and complicating it in a way that I don't think it needed to be complicated. It's almost like they're like, let's make a third game so we have a trilogy.
yeah,
What can we do differently? I guess we could throw these couple things in there. And I just don't like the things they threw in there very much. So it's not bad. Like if this was the only one that existed, I'd probably give it a play. But because there is Orchard and there is Grove, and I have those and I like those, this is a dodge for me. So Forage, it's not the worst thing in the world, but again, as when you're playing solitaire games like this, you don't want to feel even a little disappointed after playing
mm,
because you're playing by yourself. There's no reason to play it again ever if you're like that didn't click for me. Um, so like I played this 2 or 3 times and I was like, fine, I'll play Grove. Grove is better. Forage,
and
not great.
you would say Grove is the best?
I think it is. Yeah, I think I've
Okay,
had the most fun with Orchard over time because I played it the most. I played it a
okay,
lot during COVID, but Grove takes that what works in Orchard and adds like one additional thing to it that
sure,
makes it more interesting with the cards. Like with the scoring on the other side and how that kind of plays out. And it's optional. You can just ignore it if you don't want to do it. So
sure.
that works. But yeah, Grove I think is the best version. The scores kind of reflect that on Board Game Geek too. So I'm not like this isn't a hot take. I'm kind of in line with other people here as I look at it. But I think what they had is like Orchard was a good game. They iterated on it and made it, a slightly better game. And then again, yeah, there's like, let's keep doing this. And then Forage is just like, okay, we ran out of ideas. Here you go. Here's
Sure.
more.
Okay. Yeah, I have Orchard, and I remember seeing this back in the day when it came up, having, like you said, having the trilogy here, and I think there's just that kind of, I don't know if there's a word for this, just the desire, not just completionist, but like to have the little adorable things that do a thing,
Hmm.
right? And like we're going to talk about in our future review here, there's that sense of like, I like this game so much. If this other game is a variation of it, I should just buy it, right?
Hmm.
And clearly the answer is not always yes. Sometimes
No,
it's no.
no. I mean,
Plot twist.
The benefit here is that it's small, so, like, if you can find it in retail, it should only cost, like, 15 bucks.
Sure.
But these were also crowdfunded, and I'm not sure that they're in retail, so I don't know how much that helps
Yeah,
you.
makes sense. All right. Well, I have not a solo game, but something pretty light. This is Doomlings. Came out in 2002. I'm sorry, not 2002, 2022. This is a game about these little alien creatures shaped like, I don't know, basketballs. It's kind of hard to tell on the artwork. They're small, they're round, and they're kind of adorable cartoon creatures. And it turns out their little world is about to, let's just say, pop. So, as everything is hastening toward their inevitable destruction, these little creatures are getting together and they want to be the best of the best. So, they're collecting different special, I would say, genetic kind of traits to raise their profile to be, I guess, the last little alien creature standing before the world goes pop. So basically, in this game, you're going to have three separate decks. You're going to have your trait deck, and your trait deck is going to be important because at the start of the game, you are going to get a number of different traits to start with, and those traits are going to make up your tableau, and your tableau is going to have going to be made up of different color cards. There's five different colors. One color is colorless, gray in this case. Some of them, all of them, have certain point values. Sometimes it's negative, and sometimes it's a high point value. And then a number of them are going to have special abilities. Some of those special abilities will activate when you play them towards your tableau. Some will activate towards the end of the game. And some will be what they call dominant traits. And these dominant traits, you can only have two in your tableau, but these dominant traits will give you like super special abilities. So, for example, a dominant trait could be optimistic nihilism. You basically hastens the game towards its end. But a lot of the different cards are really fun, cute artwork to look at, very simplistic. This is certainly a game you can play with family or friends, pretty straightforward. You're going to have your gene pool. Your gene pool allows you to have a certain number of cards in your hand. And then at the end of each round, you are going to draw back that number of cards so that you can play more traits. But here's the kind of simple, fun element to it. You're only going to play one trait per turn, unless the card lets you do something special. These cards, again, score you points, add to a tableau. A lot of these cards are based on tableau building, but also have different set collection mechanics that go along with it. So each color does something a little different, and some of them allow you to score off a similar color or score off other people's cards. So set collection is important. There are a lot of take that cards because these little creatures want to mess with the other creatures on this planet before everything goes. So it'll allow you to kind of mess with their tableau, steal cards, give cards, switch hands throughout the game. And basically, as the game goes on, you're playing these different traits. Now, here's the element that kind of reminded me of Flux a little bit. You know how, Anthony, when you play Flux, there's a new rule almost every round?
Mhm.
Well, there's different ages. So as the planet is going through its different problematic stages, each age card flips out at the beginning of each turn, and each of these cards provides a different rule. So sometimes you can't play traits of a certain color. Sometimes it allows you to draw a number of cards before you stabilize, which is again drawing more cards up to your hand level. And some just mess with everybody, but most of them are pretty positive and allow you to gain more opportunities to play traits. But seeded in that deck of ages, there are three catastrophe cards. Catastrophe cards are pretty fun. This is where everything goes bad. So it could be a mega tsunami, it could be a AI takeover, or an ice age, or a mass extinction, retrovirus, or nuclear winter. All the bad stuff that brings typically a planet to the end. These are seated in three sections in the main deck. They typically have a negative thing that's going to happen to you and other players at the table. And then at the end of the game, once the third catastrophe comes out, you play the final bad thing that happens to everybody. You count up the points in your tableau, and whoever the most has the most points wins the game. So there is some of that take that element and tableau building from Munchkin, There is some of that rule based situation as far as Flux is concerned. But again, this game is something that is very simple to play. You can play with family, you can play friends. We were nice enough to get a review copy of this because, again, this may not be necessarily my flavor as far as it's not a heavy strategy game, not complex narrative and dynamics. But, every once in a while you want to have a game that you could throw on the table and just be like, and play a card. What do you do next turn? Just play a card and follow that particular rule. So Doomlings, fun, light, family filler games. Gets a light play for me.
That's cool. Yeah, these games always have a spot and a place. It looks very cute.
Yeah, and that's what you want. You just want something silly and simple to kind of throw at the table. And again, based upon the catastrophes, the game can go long or it could be very short because you're just seeding the decks, which typically happens. And there's a lot of luck in the games. You got good cards. I got good cards. Maybe I was able to switch hands with you or mess with your tableau. Plays better with large player count just because it allows for the diversity of actions to take place. All right, so that's everything that hit our table. Now on to our feature review. Our feature review, of course, this week is talking about what we just talked about. It's our instant buys, instant plays, instant dodges, and instant burns. This is a very selected list of things that are more or less, with exception, of course, true as far as when we're going to sit down and play a game. What are the different elements, whether it's specific IPs, mechanics, player count, designer, publisher, artist, writing, the cost of the game. Maybe it's a giant big box. Maybe it's crowdfunded. A whole bunch of different elements that make games the best for you, or generally how you kind of approach those games, or in a lot of cases, run screaming away. So, Anthony, we have a pretty fun list here. Let's start with the pretty obvious stuff for us. Our buys. These are the games that sometimes we buy in advance before we even play them, right? We see them, they come out in the market. We take a look at a little bit of the information and we just get them as soon as possible, pick them up at a convention or buy them online, get them to the tables, as can be. Anthony, what is an instant buy for you?
Yeah, so the first instant buy that I listed was Cole Worley. Just as a game designer,
So you
my
would instantly buy Cole Worley if he came up for sale.
uh, if he was for sale, yeah, come to my house and make games about things I'm interested in. Yes. Oh
Well,
man,
you do have that special Corley room in your house. So
yeah, yeah. No, do it.
you could.
I watched this great show last month. Make a game out of it, please.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I want a Cole Worley One Piece game. Do it. Uh, no, but seriously, like I have not played a game of his that I don't like. It just period, and not just that I don't like that, but that isn't like one of my favorite games of all time.
Hmm.
So, like, Root is my number two currently. We'll see what happens in a few weeks. Um, PAX Premiere Second Edition, fantastic, brilliant game. Arcs most recently came out, amazing, love it. Uh, and plenty of other games. So I know if Cole Worley is making a game, it's going to be insightful. It's going to be mechanically sound. It's going to be well designed and highly polished. Uh, and it's going to have a lot of player interaction. And that it's just an instant buy for me. Like Arcs, I didn't even know what that game was going to be. I just backed it. I was like, oh, cool. It's like Root in space, which is not what it is at all. It's just what it looked like with Kyle Farron artwork in space. Um, and I just backed it and it showed up and we played it. I'm like, oh, that's what it is. Cool, it's great. So instant back for me. Instant buy.
All right. Well, one of my instant buys for me is the Seven Wonders series.
Mm,
Starting from way back in the day, I love civilization building coupled with tableau building. Civilization gameplay is played in a lot of different ways, typically over a map with little figures kind of moving around and stuff like that. There's just something about the tableau building in Seven Wonders and how it does something which you wouldn't think is innovative, but we talked about this a little bit before.
mhm.
The errors, how things are built up. If I play a civilization game, I want to feel like the civilization is progressing in somewhat of a logical fashion, give or take, board game mechanics. This allows me to do that. This allows me to, build a civilization that could incorporate military or not at all. Could go heavy science or again, not at all. So it offers me a lot of different ways to play every particular civilization. The artwork is fantastic. The designers amazing. The company does a great job. So whether it's Seven Wonders or all of its expansions, even Seven Wonders Architects, which I'm kind of like, it's okay. I still bought it, sight unseen. Seven Wonders Duel, and now even the Lord of the Rings version of it. I will never really question Seven Wonders. It's just they've had so much out there, and I've loved all of it. So it's an instant buy for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not quite there, but I understand it, and I'm almost there with you. All right, so the next one for me is it's kind of broad, but it's something where like if I know a game is doing this, I'm instantly interested, and I often just purchase it anyways. And I'm like, I'll probably like it. We'll see. Um, so two-player asymmetrical games. Uh, my top 10 or top 20, top 30, whatever it is, like has a bunch of these, like War of the Ring, Star Wars Rebellion, um, Watergate. Like it's one of my favorite game mechanics of 1v1. Each side has a completely different approach, different mechanics that they have to master. Like it's one of the reasons I love Root, but it's like boiled down and just like each side just has to learn their thing, right? Um, and there's just something inherently engaging about having the system and like being able to look at it and understand better like how did they design this, how did you make sure it's balanced in such a way, and how do we pick it apart and see if it's balanced in such a way that it is actually even. Like you play a game like War of the Ring and you feel like the first hour or two of that game as the free peoples, you're like, how could I possibly win this game, right? And what it ends up doing is you have a complex system and you have to figure out how to work within that system with what you have, right? So if you have very little resources and not as many actions, how do you do it as efficiently as possible? Or if you're, the shadow player, how do you just overwhelm your opponent with just force, right? It's a cool way to make a game, and when it's done well, it's perfect. It is among the best gaming experiences, period. So when a two-player asymmetrical game comes out, whether it's something big and sprawling like Dune War for Arrakis, or something smaller and simple like Watergate or like Kelp most recently,
Yes.
um, I'm all in. I'll just back it and I'll see if I like it. And 70-80% of the time I do like it. If it's done well, it works really well.
It's like getting two games at once.
Yeah, right? Like
Eh,
I reviewed Dune the other week, and then immediately the next week I'm like, we got to switch. We got to play the other side, and we got to switch back,
yes.
and we got to do it the other way.
And it's not, I mean, there's a lot of, now more than ever, there's a lot of asymmetrical games out there, but typically when they are 3, 4, 5, 6 player asymmetrical, it's just too much.
It's hard. Yeah, Root
Yeah.
is a hard game. Like I don't tell everybody they should play it because some people it's too much.
Vast.
Bass is way too much.
Sure. So so with the two-player thing, and I think that's the challenge with a lot of these games is if it's asymmetrical, you need to play every faction and you need to see every faction played against you.
Right.
And the two-player versions of these work so well because you're getting that information. It only takes two game plays to get both sides of that information.
That's true. It took I I was actually tracking this. It took me 30 plays of Root before I had seen every
Sure.
combination of
Yes.
possible layouts with the 6 factions that existed at that time. There are now 10 factions, I think. So
Mhm.
it's even more complicated. But yeah, it's really hard with that game to really know for sure like which one do you like best and what's the right combo and who should play what.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, War of the Ring, you're like, all right, I would rather play the overwhelming force. It's easy, it's straightforward.
Very much true. All right. Well, next for me again, talking about a game that has a tremendous number of expansions, but has never disappointed me. This is going way back. Small World,
Mm, yeah.
and this is surprising for me. I think when I came into tabletop gaming, I the game that I brought with me from the big box classic games was Risk.
Mhm.
Risk was the thing that I played in college. We played with my friends, had a lot of great times with it. And more than any other kind of traditional big box kind of game, I was looking for something like that. I was looking for troops on a map, and I was looking for something where there was battling competitively, but it wasn't overfraught with all the other kind of multitudes of challenges and check this chart and check this thing like that. So having played Small World, I was like, mechanically, this is great, right? Deterministic battling, so you don't kind of languish over, well, I do this, and what's your armor on that, and can you avoid this, that, and the other? There's a die that's used, but it's only in a rare occasion. I love that. I love the classes and the races are mixed match. So like you could find yourself in a situation where I don't know, you have trying to think of all the different combinations. There's just so many seafaring elves. And seafaring elves is different than underground elves. So right there alone, you have a different tiny little asymmetrical kind of faction and you play it and eventually it's going to burn out more or less. There are some exceptions to that rule and you've enjoyed that asymmetrical faction, just like you were talking about, Anthony. And then you could take another one and play another asymmetrical faction, and that's fun. This is all based on the original game Vinci, and on top of which is some really beautiful, cartoony but beautifully smart, classic D&D high fantasy kind of genre graphics. So you have all the elves and the dwarves and the skeletons and the wizards and all of the expansions open up other races and classes and special abilities, but it's never overwhelming. I've played with family, I've played with friends, I've played competitively at conventions, and all of the expansions add something that it's significant, but none of them are like essential. They're just more goodness to the game. So anytime a small world expansion comes out, I pick it up and I add it to my collection because I love so many of the different aspects to it. Even so much that it's probably my biggest purchase. I have this super giant deluxe version of Small World, which I love and adore. And I wouldn't have done that if Small World, the game, wasn't just like the ultimate buy for me without question.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's I've been here for 11 years. I've heard you talk about Small World pretty
Oh,
much at least once a month for those 11 years.
sure.
So I could see this quite obviously why it's up here. So, all right. My third one here in the buy category, pretty simple. It's a theme, Lord of the Rings, right? I mentioned War of the Ring repeatedly there with the two-player asymmetrical play. You just talked about Lord of the Rings Duel
Yes.
for Middle Earth, which is a two-player asymmetrical Lord of the Rings game.
Mhm.
I've already pre-ordered that. like, um, is it good? Probably. It doesn't matter. I'm getting it. Uh, there, it's very hard for a Lord of the Rings game to come out and me not to be just immediately interested. Like, I have to know it's bad for me not to just go purchase it. Like Battle of Five Armies, instant buy. Right? I had that game for years before I even played it. So I'm just like, I love it, and I love looking at it. I'm just happy it's up there. I have like half a dozen boxes of Lord of the Rings the card game stuff that I'm slowly chipping through because I don't play it that often, but it's just I like having it, I like looking at the artwork. It's if you give me a solid Lord of the Rings game, if the mechanics are even halfway decent, I will definitely back it or purchase it. And thankfully for me, there's been a lot of very good Lord of the Rings games over the years. You know, there are some IPs for which that's not the case. I'm sorry, Chris. Star Trek is rough, but
Aw.
I know. Uh, but it's and it's not foolproof. Those deck building games from back in the day, Cryptozoic, not great, but for the most part, lots of good stuff over the years.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree. It's interesting to see that some IPs have just favored better than others,
Yeah,
and it did not have to be that case. They got really lucky with the designers and the publishers throughout. So And that is absolutely, unfortunately, not true about Star Trek. And that's why that Star Trek's not an instant buy for me.
Right. We'll get to it. It's coming, but yeah, I'm with you. And like there's other ones for me too, might that are also coming for same reason.
Absolutely. All right. Well, a mechanic in tabletop gaming, and I love a lot of mechanics, and it's kind of hard to pick just one, but one that almost always never fails me. And once I see it, I'm like, I will buy this because there's just something about it that really sticks with me. This is board games that utilize multi-use cards.
Mm,
So there's a lot of great examples of this, but basically what we're looking at is a game that utilizes cards as its main mechanic, and the card itself typically has a lot of different on each side of the card or multiple sides of the card. There are different abilities or different resources or different ways to score or situations where you tuck cards underneath the board, and depending on if you tuck it top bottom versus bottom top, it's going to be different. So like Lisboa, right? So you could tuck for one ability or tuck for a different ability. I think probably the most famous example of this is Glory to Rome. Glory to Rome has a lot of different opportunities to utilize special abilities, score points, flip the cards over, and then they become foundational material. Bruges is one of my favorites of all time because each card allows you a number of different actions and resources, and you can also flip it over and create a house for the people that are on the other side of the card.
right.
So left, right, up, down, back, front. Forest Shuffle is a relatively new game that came out last year, and that's all about these, having different animals and birds and bugs and mushrooms and butterflies, and it's all about how you tuck those cards into the tree, and then the card does something different. So no matter what a game might be, multi-use cards is like, I can find a way to do something with this, right? Even if the deck is large or the deck is random, I get to build a strategy because the card allows me to do a lot of different things, and I let my imagination and my strategic, you know, I don't know, perspective to kind of really activate those things. So yeah, multi-use cards, man.
Multi-use cards are great.
All
Can't
right,
argue
well
with that.
that leads us up to our play. Our play feature is typically games that if we went to a meetup night, open game night, and there's multiple games happening at multiple tables. But let's be fair, you can't sit at all tables all at the same time. We don't have that, special jutsu at this point. So, which are you going to sit down and play? Which are instant plays in this case? Anthony, tables are open, man. What's your instant gotta play?
All right. So I have here two mechanics, a theme, a couple options here, right? So the first thing that jumps to mind is one that like immediately early on when I first got into hobby board games was the mechanic that I most gravitated towards, right? Worker placement. So I and there are games for which I don't think are as interesting in the way that they handle worker placement, but I was thinking about like the games on my shelf that I was like I would always play an Uwe Rosenberg game, right? Like I would always sit down and play, especially like a farming one or any kind of worker placement within that. And so any game that has that mechanic, I'm open-minded to regardless of the pedigree of the designer, regardless of the theme, regardless of anything else. I'm like, "Oh, worker placement's fun." Like there's a tightness to that, there's some interaction to that, there's decision making to be had. There's always interesting decisions in those games. And the reason why it's not instant buy for me is because some of them are good and some of them are not, right? But the mechanic itself, when it's done well, is so interesting and so fun. And it feels so personal, like what you're accomplishing in the game. It's unique to you based on the decisions you made and the choices of where you put your workers. That worker placement is it's if it's in a game, I will always play it no matter what the theme is.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And that's one of the earliest kind of game mechanics that I think you and I encountered
Yeah.
and played a lot of that. That was, I mean, before, I think before deck building, it was worker placement. Like worker placement was the thing.
Yeah, yeah. The first game that kept me up at Myriad past midnight was Lords of Waterdeep,
Yes.
right? And it's, since then I've played much more complex worker placement games, but that was the first one. I was like, this is great. I love this mechanic. I'm making different decisions than everybody else every single round.
Hmm.
And that's always, fun. It's interesting. You want to see if those decisions you've made are better than someone else's.
Certainly. And again, it allows you to mess with other people, but not directly,
Right.
which is good. It
Yeah.
should work that way.
Interaction is key. Like I'm fine. There's a lot of games I like that don't have a lot of interaction, but some interaction is necessary to feel like you're having a social experience.
Very true. All right. Well, again, I have a combination here. One of the You mentioned worker placement, Anthony, so I'm going to counter here with tableau building.
Yep.
Now, one of the reasons when you're looking at game night and you look at different games on the table and things that are being played, one of the most visually impressive and appealing game elements is a tableau builder, because as the game goes on, you get to see something, like literally built, right? The cards are building something, whether it's a civilization or a business or something, and the artwork, the graphic design, the colors come out there, the table gets, enlivened by the work that you've done. Now, playing the game itself is so much fun because a lot of games have a win or loss condition. I think mostly all games do. Cooperatives are its own thing. When you play a tableau builder, you get to see what you accomplished. It's not, I scored 59 points. It's not, oh, I came in second on here. Like, look at what I built. I built this machine. And a lot of times, honestly, whether it's Agricola, Caverna, or any number of games out there where, Seven Wonders, where at the end of the game, I feel like I accomplished something. Maybe my machine didn't score all the points to win the game, but I had a really cool machine. Look, this worked into this connected into that. This pipe connected to that pipe. Look how cool that is. That all worked together. That was my strategy. Look, you can see the distinctive gameplay and strategic choices that I made throughout. So, work replacement, if I see that's happening, I'm sitting down, because whether it's the best game or not, I get to do something and I get to see it done out there for everyone to see.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I feel very similar about that one.
Mhm.
All right. So next up, I mentioned Lord of the Rings as an instant buy. Instant play, not quite a buy because of just variable conditions of different types of games, is Star Wars. Star Wars is one of my favorite IPs going back to childhood. Grew up on watching Star Wars films playing on Saturday afternoons on local TV, and it's been hit or miss over the years. A lot more hit lately than miss, but especially early on, Star Wars games were not immediately instantly going to be a win, right? Um, and they take different tacks, they take different approaches to the types of gameplay. A lot of them these days, especially, are miniature based, which is not something that I immediately gravitate towards. It's not on any of these lists here necessarily, but it's not something that I'm gonna like jump out of my shoes for. I'm not a miniatures gamer, so I love me some X-Wing, I love me some Armada, I love me some Legion, but those are games that are hard to get played, and maybe I own them because I like the miniatures more than I want to play the game, right? So there are exceptions to the rule. We got things like Star Wars Rebellion or Imperial Assault, but then you also have just games that are less engaging for me that maybe don't click. That all said, if I show up at game night and someone's like, "I have a new Star Wars game," I don't really need to know anything else. They don't need to show me what the mechanics are, or who designed it, or who published it. I'm like, "I'll play that. That's cool." Like, I might ask how long it is, but that's more related to when I need to go home. So Star Wars is an instant play. I'll do a little more research before I buy it.
Yeah, for it's had a mostly good record.
Yes, yeah,
And
especially the last 10 years.
oh yes. And again, like we said about Lord of the Rings, like there's just IPs that are luckier than others. And Star Wars being with Fantasy Flight for so many years to this day have done a exceptional job. X-Wing Miniatures and Star Wars Rebellion, Star Wars: A Deck Building Game, the CCG. It's had its misses, but yeah, generally quality throughout.
Yeah.
So I guess its opposite side of the same coin, Star Trek. Star Trek is a wonderful universe with diverse alien civilizations, and so many different games have come out for it, and it's had a good reputation, but there has certainly been some clunkers in there for sure. The idea that I could be doing space battles, I could be doing scientific investigation. There's some philosophy thrown in there. There's some alien races and some really unique artwork and storytelling. And again, the wonderful canon that goes along with it is typically why I'll always, oh, that's a Star Trek game that I have not played before. I definitely want to play that. It's not always a buy for me, but it's certainly always a play. It just, there's a rich storyline that goes throughout, and you could tell because this IP is so important to so many people, including myself, that the designers really do meaningful things with it. Because there's a philosophy to it that is all about um, being our best as far as humanity is concerned. So you see that come across in a lot of the games.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, Star Trek's great. Like, if it works really well. Like, it should work, but it's such a complex IP, I think,
It is,
that
yeah.
it's really easy to mess up. So,
Yes. There was that dice game way back in the day. We won't talk about that, but
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to mess it up in multiple ways, like, not
Yes.
not just in games. Um, alright,
Oh, yes.
yeah. We've seen a lot of that lately. Uh, so next up is a mechanic for me, economic engine building.
Mhm.
So what does that mean? One of the things I love most about Euro games is, again, I like to feel like I'm doing my own thing, right? I don't like to feel like I'm making the same decisions as someone else or that we're all going for the same location. I'm not as big of a fan of like area control type games for that reason. What I like to feel is that I'm building a thing that is unique to me that other people cannot replicate, and or if they can, that I have a way to get around them. And so that's usually through the economy of the game, right? You're choosing which tiles to collect, you're choosing which things to purchase and to sell, what contracts to complete. And so when you can do that in a way that then chains into other things, right? You have a system that allows you to create and trade and sell and whatever that might be in a way that's unique to you in the context. I really enjoy that. And again, it comes back to like I talk about Uwe Rosenberg games. A lot of them are economic engine building games. You take worker placement actions to collect some kind of resource or tile or card, and then you are able to do things with that that is unique to you, right? Spirium, I've mentioned a lot, is one of my favorite games. You are building an engine with various tiles in front of you that allow you to take various actions, converting things into different things that allow you to move up on the victory point track. Um, Great Zimbabwe is another one. It's in my top 20. Clans of Caledonia, Feast for Odin. Like, these are the types of games that I immediately gravitate towards. If I look at a game and I can see the economy in it, I'm like, okay, I want to play that. I want to see how that economy works. Uh, Again, it doesn't always work. Sometimes it doesn't work, or it's flat, or it is not unique and asymmetrical enough where I could do the exact same thing as the person across the table, and that's not fun because we're going to tie, right, or come close to each other. But when it's done well, it really allows for like that diversity of decision making that makes the game more fun for me. So economic engine building.
Yeah, this is I tell the story a lot because when I came into gaming, I was like, I just want to see your sci-fi or your fantasy games. That's it. Like,
Yeah,
why would you make a game about anything else, right? Like that's the thing you make games about. And they're like, wait a minute, how about an economic engine builder? And I'm like, what the heck are you? No, no,
yeah.
no. I mean, economics? I don't want to do economics. And they're like, and then
Math, boo,
then
math.
you're doing, I don't know, logistics. I gotta do legit. Oh, come on, man. Spreadsheets? Why is there a spreadsheet here? And they're fun. I don't know how they make them fun. I think that's the greatest thing that game designers have ever done
Yeah,
because you and I, and I'm sure everybody out there, have been in math or economics class or any variation of that and gone, oh, dear God, let it end. Just let it
yeah,
end.
yeah.
And then you play these games and you're like, I never want this to end. This is fun.
I know. I didn't know I still liked math.
I know.
I have multiple writing degrees. I've been a copywriter and teacher for most of my last 20 years, and I'm like, actually, math is awesome in a
Yes.
board game. So
Yes. It say, I'm psych philosophy major throughout, and I'm just like, if I would have played these games earlier as a child, they did not exist. But if I did, whatever form they did exist in, I probably would have went a different way,
yeah.
professionally, because I'm like, I am good at this. What? This is fun.
How?
How?
What did
How is
I?
this a thing?
How am I so good at this?
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why we do the board game academics journal, because it's
Yeah.
the idea that if you can be introduced to some of these gaming mechanics early enough, you may discover skills and abilities and aptitudes of things that you never thought that existed. I certainly did not know. But yeah, no, I could do a thing. It's great.
Yeah.
Speaking of games that are radically different in so many different ways, it is the master, it is the classics. It is Stefan Feld. Stefan Feld at one point for me and maybe for you, Anthony, was an instant buy.
Yeah.
Over the years, um, more of his modern stuff has dropped him down to a play. But I can't argue with the fact that he is still the one designer that continues to surprise me. When his games come out, they are typically very different from each other.
Hmm.
They're unique in their own right. Here's a tableau builder. Here's, here's a drafting game. Here's, you're going to be rolling dice and assigning them to certain sections. Here's a civilization game. Here's, you drop cubes in a tower and you send your ships out and you do some building. Here's endless numbers of point salad. Here's some of the best two-player games with their arena games. Just a wild ludology of just brilliant different games across the board. It almost makes me sad that the City Collection have just re-implemented some of his older stuff, because just his creativity is unique, and I think in tabletop gaming.
Hmm.
So I'm always willing and looking forward to his next game, even if I've been disappointed with his previous game, because there's always something different coming out there. So yeah, Stefan Feld.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're spot on with this. Like Stefan Feld for me, if you'd asked like 3 years ago, this would have been in the buy category.
Yeah.
Um, and it's not that it's changed that much. And I didn't put it on my list because it's on your list, but I feel like play is a good place for it. Like I would play any Stefan Feld game. I look forward to playing any Stefan Feld game, and then I will decide if I'm going to purchase them. And it honestly, it's just the volume and the recent cost is the reason that they're no longer instant plays. Like there's a lot of them, and more recently, especially with Queen games, they're really expensive.
Yeah.
So that's not a knock on the quality of the game. Like I think Marrakesh is a good game. I liked it. I
Hmm.
haven't purchased it because it's stupidly expensive. Like that's all.
Yeah, he had a couple of odd down games in between, and then it went to Queen games, and then it was just unapproachable for a lot of reasons.
Right.
So, but yeah, no, I'm excited about Sevolution. I think that's how you
Yeah, yeah.
pronounce that.
Evolution it looks good.
Odd. Yeah, I mean, it could be his renaissance. Maybe he comes back.
Yeah, I hope so.
So,
I hope so. All right. My next one is shouldn't be too surprising for anybody here. I like solo games, but
what? Who?
I I'm not just gonna throw solo games on here because everything has a solo mode now. And
Ugh.
and like half of them are bad.
It's true.
Like the game was not designed for solo play. The
Uh-huh.
AI, and AI is, big quotation marks that are around AI, isn't very good, and it just doesn't work. Like
It
I
doesn't.
used to there was a period of time when it started happening when I would back a game on Kickstarter if it said it had a solo mode, and then I ended up owning a bunch of games that weren't very good, that had mediocre solo games. So what I really look for now is a solo game with a win condition. Uh, and what I mean by that is it's not a high score race. It's not just testing out the materials. It's not like a lighter version of the game. It's not a completely different version of the game. There are some games now that come with like a different rule book that's 30 pages long and uses all the same mechanics and components, but it's a different game at the end of the day. A lot of those Turchy solo modes do that. Um, what I really want to see is a game that takes the core mechanics, like everything I know about the game that I've played with all my friends, and allows me to go through that with a goal in mind. Like I've played Terraforming Mars solo at the table like 150 times because it is that, right? It is the exact same game I play with everybody else, but there's a specific goal. Complete all the objectives and reach the certain score within a certain number of rounds. Perfect. I love that. You know, Uwe Rosenberg games is just what's your high score? And I still play those sometimes because I like the mechanics of the game and I want to
Sure.
play them.
Yeah, yeah.
But if I'm like, I want to play a good solo game right now, I'm not going to play a Rosenberg game because it's just there's no challenge. There's nothing to reach for. I want to know that I'm either winning or losing, and then within that context, how well did I do? So solo games that have a clear win condition. Cooperative games are great for this, but not all cooperative games are great for solo play. So it's not always one and the same.
Mhm.
So I look for games like Spirit Island is perfect because it's a great solo experience, but it has a very clear win condition. Whereas a pandemic or something, I don't find to be as compelling. So solo games with a win condition is what I'm looking for.
Excellent. A little bit of a different tact here. When you play tabletop games, one of the things that we tend to overlook, unless it's a problem, is the art and graphic design. And when it is a problem, it's a problem.
Hmm.
And the artists, so many great artists, and there's a lot of people that I could think of that deserve to be here. But the real challenge is when you are sitting at a game for hours and you have to look at a board for hours and you have to navigate the graphic design and artwork on that board for hours. And that's really where the great artist and just the geniuses kind of separate, right? There's just something about certain artists that just are elevated. And for me, that artist is Ian O'Toole. You and I, Anthony, we've played endless numbers of Vital Lacer's games. They're big, they're heavy, they're crunchy, they're long, and they take a lot of extreme concentration, and they have to be easily readable and recognizable just by a glance because you have to be able to process a lot of information, a lot of math, a lot of calculations and combinations and so forth and so on. And with those heavier games, they have to be rich with the artwork to inspire you to keep playing, right? Because when we used to play a lot of these heavy games, they were great. I mean, I'm talking to you, 18 double X, who doesn't know how to do anything other than a grid and a spreadsheet and stuff. Ian O'Toole goes above and beyond. Um, the board and the artwork for Lisboa is a masterpiece. It's something you could
Mm.
certainly just tack onto the wall. There's so many other games here. I mean, the 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 graphical challenges of Clinic, which is just if you ever play Clinic, you know what I'm saying because there's stuff everywhere and the dimensions and everything how it plays together is certainly challenging throughout. And just so many of his other games. Vinos is brilliant. Escape Plan is colorful and dynamic. Black Angel is so unique. The Gallerist, beautiful, simplistic, just genius across the board. Carnegie is smart, especially as far as like being a business game. Merv on Mars, like again, I can go on and on. And it's not that his artwork is necessarily like this is the prettiest, right? This is just the most beautiful artwork of all. It's just so smart and innovative and evocative and easy and clean throughout. And it's inspiring to play a lot of his games. So if I see any old tool at the table, I'm playing it.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And it's a funny thing. Like I feel like early in his career, it was almost just a buy.
Yeah,
I'm like, that's a pretty game. I want to own it.
sure.
And he's become prolific enough that not all of the games he does artwork for are games that I want to own.
Yeah, a lot of
Um,
the smaller kind of stuff, fit to print, nice artwork, but gameplay maybe not so much.
right. Yeah, and that's not a bad thing. Like I'm
No.
glad that he's making a living off of this, but at the same time, it's just like I don't need that on my shelf. I have a bunch of his other work, but so much of it is so good. And I think what he really excels in is taking a very complex system and making it accessible aesthetically, which is like
Yes.
what you mentioned. You're staring at this for a long time. You have to understand a lot of information.
Yeah.
How do you make that work visually? And he does such a good job of that. Like the fact that he's Lacerda's chosen visual representative says a lot.
Yes. He brings life to, dry, what would be dry basic Euro mechanics.
Hmm.
All right. Well, that leads us up to um next in a very important area that we have to deal with, and that's our dodges. Games that if we went to game night and we saw those games at the table and we were like, huh, 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 and then we just blend right back into the bush.
Yes.
Because
Yep.
as much as we love the people at the table, it's definitely not a game situation that we want to engage with. So, Anthony, you dodging some games out there?
I am dodging so many games out there. So first up is Cthulhu,
Uh huh.
right? It just has a theme, and that's not saying I don't like some Cthulhu games,
Sure.
but if I have a choice and someone's like, "We're gonna play Arkham, whatever," I will almost certainly like slowly back away to the other side of the room.
Yeah.
And I don't, it's a combination of things. Like I'm not a big horror fan in general. That particular like early 20th century aesthetic doesn't really interest me much. There are exceptions to that rule, but like there are games that I love that I avoided for years because I thought I wouldn't like them. Like I just actively dodged the theme. Like Australia is a great game. You told me it was a great game multiple
Yes.
times, and I was like, Cthulhu, I'm not interested. And then finally, like a friend was like, "Yeah," he brought it over. We're like, "We're playing this." I'm like, "Okay." I'm like, "Oh, it's good. Of course, it's good. Everybody said it
Yeah.
was good." Um, but the
I do
theme,
I do have a podcast, man. I'm just saying.
I know, but the theme is bad. Why are we doing Cthulhu? So I know people love it. It's just like a personal taste thing. But if I see Cthulhu on a game, I'm not, I'm just not going to play it unless it's the only option. Like, unless I'm having a one on one game day with somebody and that's the game they bring over and I'm stuck playing it, I'm not going to play that.
It drives you mad, is what you're saying.
It does drive me mad. It's bad. And the guy who made it was super racist.
Not a regular racist, super racist.
So racist.
That's fantastic.
Comically so.
Yes.
If that can be comic.
Yeah,
Like,
I remember our early game days when we used to go way back to Myriad, and then there was always a Cthulhu RPG out there. There was always a Cthulhu board game out there, whether what version of Arkham, whatever. And I think for the last several years, like when we talk about Cthulhu based games, like if I or you recommend one of those, that means something
yeah,
because again, you have to drag us kicking and screaming with your tentacles to actually make us play those things. So I
very
can
true.
I feel that. Uh, and again, if all the time in the multiverse, the elder gods could, maybe it's the thing that does drive you mad. Kind of, yeah,
Maybe.
maybe. All right, well, kind of on that same tact, one of the things that I have been dodging lately is tabletop role playing games.
Mm.
Now, this is not because I don't like tabletop role playing games. I love myself some tabletop role playing games. Big fan. Woohoo! Me over here. But the problem is generally getting that game up, going, and staying consistent.
Yeah, that last one in particular.
And it kind of breaks my heart because the brilliance and the beauty of tabletop gaming, board gaming, I should say, board gaming, is that you can go to wherever it is, open the game up, play the game, get the game played, have a satisfying conclusion to the game, and then be done with the game. A role playing game takes so much build up, so much preparation, time, energy, effort. For me personally, a lot of social energy that is rare to come by in some cases. And I guess just the groups that go along with it just doesn't work. Or I haven't, in my experience, found that. I think it's a shame. We've tried multiple times, you and I, Anthony. We've played in multiple groups across the board, and it
Yeah,
just
yeah.
consistency is always a challenge there. So a lot of times people are like, "Hey, I got this new role playing game," and I'm like, "That's great. I will be right back," and then I just go out the the bathroom window.
Yeah. it's I don't know. Like I cannot remember the last time I played an RPG. Not to completion, but like to a point of satisfaction. Like
Sure.
of like we've completed an arc or we've completed an adventure or something. And we're like we're all done and we're happy. It's always like yeah, Jim had to move, or Tom had a baby, or Sally just went out, dropped off the face of the planet,
Yeah.
and we can't continue because we had a three-person party, and now we only have a two-person. Like that's what happens every single time, and so it's really hard
You know how
without a
many
dedicated group.
you know how many fictional characters I have hanging out in limbo somewhere?
I know.
They're just like the middle of a woods and they're just like, they're gonna come back, right? They're coming back. It's just like any day now, right? They're coming back for us. Oh man, so many abandoned campaigns. Way too many abandoned campaigns. And
Yeah,
it just and the problem to it is like even games sometimes that happens. But there's so much heavy lift in the beginning to get that going, to character creation, rolling your character and the whole thing, especially for the GM there. It's just I can't. I just yeah, no.
yeah.
Not so much.
I'm with you, man. All right, so kind of in that vein, but maybe for a different reason. Another thing that I generally dodge is narrative adventure games. So a narrative adventure game to me, and I know there's a lot of genres within this, is a game in which you are moving a miniature piece around on a map, and there's a story involved. You're reading a lot of stuff to each other, and you throw a bunch of dice. Now, that could mean a bunch of different things to a bunch of different people, but the core idea here is you're not actually doing anything. You're making decisions within the story framework, but the story framework is the story framework and you're living within that, right? So, like these big sprawling sandbox games, it's not really what I'm thinking of, although I could also throw that in the dodge. I'm not a huge fan of those. Um, but it's just you're just meandering. It's a lot of meandering and seeing what's I'm gonna walk over there and I'm gonna roll a die and hey, I found a chest. What's in the chest? I don't know. Draw one of these three cards. What's on the cards? I don't know. I got a bow or something. Okay, cool. Like that was my whole turn, and now I wait 15 minutes for my next turn. And I just on a personal level, I find them kind of boring.
Mhm.
Like the emergent narrative is never that interesting compared to like a bespoke narrative written by somebody with a purpose. Um, there are exceptions to this rule. I've played games where the emergent narrative is very fascinating, but it's so rare. I'd rather play a role playing game or play an actual like mechanically sufficient like dungeon crawler where I'm doing stuff and building something and have a system and an engine and a tableau. But just like let's wander around a map and see what we can find. And maybe there's some pretty pictures along the way. I'm just like, I don't want to do this at all. So if I see something like that, I actively avoid it because games in this category have driven me nuts over the years.
No, I hear you. That just there's so much build up and then just like, and I did a thing. Did you? Did you really? I don't
There's a
know.
lot of and I did a thing in these games, yeah. And people are like, "Good, you did the thing," and then you just kind of peters out and like, "I guess let's go home now."
It's trying to be that weird crossover between a role playing game and a board game,
Yeah,
and it just doesn't do it on either kind of situation.
yeah.
On that same tact, one of the games, unfortunately, I say unfortunately, but I will dodge, is a massive miniature campaign game. These are the enormous Kickstarter, wondrous plastic monstrosities where it's, even though it's in a giant box, there's multiple giant boxes. And you see some poor soul trying to unbox the multitude of boxes. And you start running a scenario and they're like, oh wait, I need to get all these different creatures out and they're from this box and I gotta place these on the board and oh that werewolf has this kind of tracker that goes along with it and they have these kind of hit points and this one has that and oh no it's not big enough for the table, pull another table over and this creature is like three times its size but it also brings in these smaller creatures with it. All right, open up that expansion box, it's got the smaller creatures in it. Oh, that one takes this kind of damage, but that one takes that kind of damage. The immensity of the setup to be able to play what again is sometimes a very simple, you know, roll dice to hack and slash. Um, the massive miniatures should be an indication of just like joyous fun. And just inevitably, it's a grind because to play these massive miniature campaign games, they are going to take numerous playthroughs. And the massive amount of plastic just only adds to the delay.
Mhm.
And they spawn other creatures and they have different actions and they have different stuff that comes along with it. And here's these giant miniatures that come along in the game. And on the Kickstarter page, it looks like every kid's dream come true. Like all of these toys, the gigantic Cthulhu or the gigantic monster dragon kind of thing. And I want all the gigantic things and it costs $600. And I got, and it takes 6 hours to play one campaign scenario because of all the build up and setup with just the plastic on the board. I have yet to come across one of these games that works or plays extremely well that I want to play multiple versions of this.
Mhm.
I think that's why Gloomhaven has done historically so well because it was the one major thing that it pulled out. I mean, pulled out dice rolling too, but you
Right.
didn't have those massive kind of plastic setups at the table. Everything was standees and it was fairly easy to run through. These are almost like a red flag as
Right.
far as like you're going to have a bad time and most of that bad time is sitting there. And I think that's the one big sin about tabletop gaming, sadly, is, and I think Anthony, this is your thing as far as trick taking games is if you're not doing anything, that's not fun. it's just
No, no, yeah.
it's just not fun.
No, it's not fun.
Yes. All right. Well, there's our dodges. Now, finally, the dreaded burn. Those are the games that under no conditions we will ever buy, play, or even dodge those games. No politeness here, my friends. These are the ones. Burn, my friend. What do you got to burn?
All right. So my first one here is I have a serious one and a silly one. We'll start with a serious one. I don't want to play games that represent slavery
What?
in any form. And like, I obviously that sounds like, oh, of course not. Why would you want to do that? But like, some of these games are very popular, right? I don't think that's a thing. Like, I feel like a game is a good way to explore complex systems in accessible ways. It's a good way to explore culture. It's a good way to explore the way we interact with one another and how the world works in general. I don't think it's a good thing for erasing the complexities and problems behind real world atrocities, right? And it's done in a lot of different ways and a lot of different things. So it's not just like I have a problem with this particular thing. There's a lot of different stuff that shows up in board games that you're going to talk about one here in a minute, um, that I don't like, that I think shouldn't be done. But this one in particular, it makes me feel icky, right? It's not even just like I think this is bad. It's just like I feel uncomfortable. I don't think we should be having this conversation in this context. Um, and so slavery as a game mechanic feels reductive. It feels disingenuous. It feels disrespectful. Um, and it never explores it as well as it could, except like a couple of instances, right? Like Freedom the Underground Railroad has slavery as a game mechanic. It's doing it in a way that is exploring the systems that we're trying to end slavery, right? That's a different thing.
It's yeah, it's abolitionist, right?
Yeah,
It's the anti-slavery. You're not enslaving people as a mechanic. You're freeing people as a mechanic.
right. Yeah, and that's what the game is about. Like
The,
it's built around that idea.
around freedom, you're freeing them. Yeah.
Right. Then you look at a game like Puerto Rico, that's not what the game is about. The game is about building up the most wealth and the best,
Sure.
economic engine, and you happen to be employing slaves to do that. And they don't even address it fully, right? Or Endeavor, where
Yes.
you can actively participate in the slave trade to benefit your performance. And maybe if things go poorly, it's going to hurt you later. Maybe. I don't like that. I don't think it should exist. I don't think we should be doing that. And I don't care how oh, it's being subversive because it's talking about how slavery is bad when it's overturned and those people get punished. I'm like, yeah, but we're sitting at a table in public talking about not wanting to overturn slavery. Like
Yes.
that's a bad thing to do. So I don't like that as a mechanic. There's a lot of things I don't like as mechanics, but this is the one that like jumped out to me the most when we put this list together. It's just like these games. just change them, and they have been. A lot of them are being changed because sometimes the games are good and the mechanics are bad, right? Um, but yeah, let's not do that. Like we've we've seen a lot of games do it, and the fact that they all have to change it tells you that they probably shouldn't have done it in the first place, right? You got your five tribes, you've got your endeavors, you got your Puerto Ricos, your Tales of the Arabian Nights, your archipelagos. Like it's there's a reason they're not around anymore.
Yeah. And like you said, they're while these are abstract mechanics that we are engaging in, they are still abstract mechanics that we're engaging in, but also we're being rewarded by their engagement.
Hmm.
So even though there may be something in the rule book or in a supplement that says slavery's bad,
Hmm.
or hey, if you do the slavery thing, there may be an issue for you. But let's be fair, like it drives you to not end slavery, right? As a game mechanic, as a player, if you're participating or if you're forced, and I think it's not even an if, right? If you don't participate, you don't benefit.
Right.
So it's one of those things where either no one participates and the mechanic is unnecessary for the game, or everyone participates and then there's no real lesson there because everyone's benefiting from it or getting knocked from it or not getting knocked from it because you don't want to stop that. So,
Hmm.
and again, inevitably it's not it is a such a problematic dynamic that has occurred and still occurs to this day. There's still slavery to this day, that our participation in it as a game mechanic is, I mean, there's a revulsion to that. There is something that's very anti-human
Yeah.
there.
And like when I tell people who aren't board gamers that games like this exist, they look visibly repulsed. Like I tell my students or my colleagues on the campus, they're like, "Why would somebody make the game like that?" I'm like, "Good call." Because in our own little echo chamber, sometimes we're like, "Well, it's historical or whatever." People are trying like, there's people who defend this. We're like, "Is it a problem? Is it me?" I'm like, "No, this is weird. It's a weird thing to do to include this as a game mechanic."
It's true. Now, what goes hand in hand with that, with slavery, unfortunately, is colonization. Now, colonization is another worldwide, continuous to this day, extremely serious issue that a lot of people are still very much in favor of. You become a nationalist, you become so supportive of your nation that you somehow other or dehumanize other people and their life and their world and their country and their living situation, that you feel that you have the right, that supersedes their humanity, to infringe, to occupy, to, in a lot of cases, genocide a people. And again, there's something that's so innately revolting about that from a humanity standpoint, right? In the end, we're all humans. We're all part of the same exact family, all same genetics, all same world, all same land. We don't own anything. We're not born out of nothing. We come from everybody. We return to the same place. And in this day and age, more than any other, for us to still participate into it as a value of success is problematic because in a lot of ways we are promoting nationalism in a very problematic way. Now, again, we can look at some stuff that's historical, but as you mentioned, a lot of games have taken it out of that system because, as we've learned from board game academics and from a lot of the journal articles that our scholars have put together, there's there is in our engagement with tabletop gaming, there's a reinforcement not just of the good but also of the bad. And some of that is propagandized, right? Like, things weren't so bad when we colonized. Everybody was happy. Look at the board game. Everyone's smiling. There's little pink tokens with smiles on it. Uh, that's not good, Santa Maria.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, the little white pink face tokens are all happy about that situation. It's not a good thing. And it's a sad thing because these are brilliant game designers that have clearly had a blind spot in their own upbringing, historical context, and have limited them, from seeing the problems that they are putting out there. And again, if games can do anything great, it is to help us understand and break down systems that are so problematic that they're crimes against humanity. So it was a standard, and now it's becoming revised, and we're really glad to see that. But it doesn't have a place, and it's no longer something that Again, I didn't know games when I was approaching them. Now I'm a lot more suspect when I come down to a game. I'm like, all right, so what is this doing here? Is it just a spreadsheet? Is it just a thing, or is this actually what are we promoting here? What is this saying? So colonization is a theme. Burn it, baby, burn it.
No more. All right. So my second one for burning is a little sillier. And it's not targeted. It's legit. I do not want to play these games. Is Munchkin likes. So games that you build something up, and at the end you're just kind of slap fighting until somebody runs out of slaps. Uh,
Runs out of slaps. I love it.
it's Munchkin, and then there's a lot of games that try to do the Munchkin formula,
Yeah.
and I understand why anybody can play these. They're very I don't want to say family friendly because I feel like these probably lead to a lot of fights, but so does Monopoly. So whatever, it's family friendly. um, and at the end of the day, it's cool theming. It's accessible in a lot of different ways. But I just, from a game perspective, have never found it compelling. I'm like, cool, I've done some things. Oh, okay, you have one more card than me. I'm not going to win. Cool, great. Whatever we've done for the last 90 minutes makes no sense. It has no purpose. We could have just started right here. We could have just drawn a hand of cards and thrown them at each other and seen who came out on top. And that could have been the whole game. So I don't find that fun or compelling. And yeah, occasionally you get a game that's like it's like Munchkin, but with this. And as soon as it says like Munchkin in any form, I'm out. I'm like, no thank you. It's not a game for me. So
Gotcha. Makes sense. All right, and my last one here for Burns is the werewolf size social deduction games. So having played a lot of these in my life and suffered through a lot of these, again, a lot of these games you're not doing much of anything, and typically what you're playing or what you're doing is based upon randomness, and what happens is a lot of randomness. So when you get a social deduction game and you get large numbers, maybe it's 15, 20 different people, awesome, because everyone can have a role and you could all do different things. But the actual gameplay of it is just very much a full of people sitting at a table or chairs and trying to remember their roles, trying to knock other people out for random reasons because that's pretty much all you can do in some cases. And it's just an enormous time sink. And I just want to employ those gamers to play some games with me that are games. And I feel so immensely terrible about the fact that I'm not enjoying time with them to play games with them, and this just it certainly seems like, just like I guess in Werewolf in some ways, where like they look like a game, but in fact it's not a game. It's gonna eat you. It's gonna eat your whole night. So no werewolf size social deduction games, my friend. Sorry, can't do it. Can't have it. Burn it, baby. Get some
nope.
silver. Get a steak. Whatever it takes.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not a fan either because I have a beard, and then people are like, "Oh, you have a beard, so you must be bad." I'm like, "Cool, that's insightful."
Dude,
I'm
I
out.
apologize for that so many times now at this point.
Although occasionally I'm like get rolled into werewolf, and I'm like, "I'm out first." Okay, cool. I'm gonna go get dinner.
Well, see, that's what I was going to mention. I don't know if you remember Rob from our early days of playing Werewolf, and Rob would always go out first. And we always felt bad for Rob that he was knocked out first until we realized Rob wanted to be knocked out first. So he didn't have to play the game. Rob is brilliant. Be
Yes.
like Rob. Don't play these gigantic social deduction games. Like, I get it. It should work. It should be fun. It should be meaningful. But the werewolf kind of thing just does not pan out.
No.
Play other games with other people that are fun and smaller, and you get the rules and stuff. So I don't know. All right, everyone. Well, there you go. Our instant buys, plays, dodge, and of course, the dreaded burns. Hopefully, this gives you some sort of sense of our perspective on our ratings and our decision making. But of course, we do this as well, right? This is very much in our present mind. So when we do come across these different areas, we make sure to take these into account to give you the most objective ratings and rationales possible. But if for no other reason, it's a lot of fun to talk about.
Yeah.
So until next time, this is Chris.
And this is Anthony.
And we'll save you all a seat at the table. Take care, everyone.